Exactly. And on that, a lot of organizations, the majority of organizations that we speak to, it's not a case where every team is using the same tooling. So one team might be using one set of tools. For instance, even with regards kind of CI/CD, one team might be using Jenkins, another team might be using GitHub Actions. So that's something that you need to be conscious of as well. With regards to the integrations and the tooling that it integrates with, within a larger organization, there can be a big impact there. Okay, so if we jump in, we've talked about some of the considerations and also some of the importance of the API testing. But if we actually jump in and have a look at the open source versus the commercial, we can look at the two tools that we're kind of going to focus on in today's session. So SoapUI, which is a SmartBear tool. So this is open source. And I'd actually be curious to see from the attendants or the attendees on the call here today, if you want to pop into the chat section, if you're currently using SoapUI or any other open source tooling at the moment, just feel free to let us know. But SoapUI, it's an API, so desktop application, and it was initially founded or created in 2005, and it's used for functional and regression testing of APIs. And it also has some load testing capabilities there as well. But this is something, even from speaking with the product team there recently, there's a large number of users still of SoapUI, so still very commonly used tool. And again, something just very easy to get up and running with your API testing. So with SoapUI, as you can see here with considerations, there isn't any kind of hidden costs with it. So there is no kind of licensing costs with SoapUI. Now, with regards to the advantages, as we mentioned, broad user base, community there, and again, cost effective. So very, very good tool. We'd see a lot of customers, I suppose, in the very, very early stages, or if they have smaller teams. And again, we'll go through a lot of these kind of determining factors later on in the webinar. But a lot of users, would potentially have had some experience with SoapUI, or if, depending on the size of the organization and the testing strategy, the stage of it, they might be already using something like SoapUI. So SoapUI is the open source offering that we have. And then with regards the commercial offering, we have ReadyAPI. So again, similar to SoapUI, ReadyAPI is a desktop application. It would have actually been even though the naming is different, it would have been the professional version of SoapUI. So you might have known, it would have been known as SoapUI Pro years ago, and it was rebranded. But ReadyAPI is a desktop application, can run on Windows, Linux, Mac OS. And as we touched on earlier, ReadyAPI is a tool that provides ease of use for users when building out their API testing strategy. So it'll allow you to move kind of more from a kind of script heavy tool or an open source kind of script heavy tool to a tool that you can build out end-to-end testing workflows with point and click. So it does support scripting, but it's not a requirement when you're building out those end-to-end API testing workflows. And that's where we see a lot of organizations see the benefit of tooling like ReadyAPI. So if you are looking to move more from a manual testing strategy, which some of the very small organizations might have, or even depending on different teams, if you are looking to move more towards that kind of automated testing of your APIs, ReadyAPI will allow you to data drive the tests. We can pass values between different test steps, generate reports, create multiple environments, all by point and click. So the ease of use with ReadyAPI is huge. And another key, oh, sorry, Joe, jump in.
No, sorry, Adrian, to cut across, but just while you're on that topic, like I think, the line that I would always use with, if the conversation is about SoapUI versus ReadyAPI in terms of functionality, you know, yes, there's things like protocols that, maybe SoapUI doesn't support as many protocols as ReadyAPI does, but for the most part, you know, technically speaking, because of SoapUI scripting abilities, you know, you could pretty much script and write a script or write scripts to get SoapUI to behave in whatever way you want it to behave in terms of your testing. So it's not that there are many things that SoapUI absolutely cannot do that ReadyAPI can do. More so, the benefit that I've seen with ReadyAPI is that ReadyAPI has like native functionality for a lot of that stuff, like your data-driven testing, like reusing authorization tokens, things like that, which just means that a tester can get the job done more quickly using ReadyAPI in a lot of cases because they don't have to write like a custom script for this or that functionality. So that's maybe one thing to keep in mind as you're looking at these two things. And it's usually why when a team is looking to scale up their testing, that they might start talking to us about ReadyAPI as opposed to SoapUI that they're currently using, right? Because they might know from a conversation with us or from material online that there's out of the box support for certain test steps or things like that that isn't there in SoapUI open source. So that's one thing to keep at the back of your mind as we're going through this session, just from a functionality perspective. But exactly as you said, Adrian.
Yeah, and the functionality that I mentioned in ReadyAPI, because it's a very important point, Joe. The data-driven testing, so being able to pull in a large data set and loop through that very quickly, pass values between different test steps, have kind of multiple environments. A lot of that functionality is, can be achieved correctly within SoapUI, the open source tooling. So it can be achieved. But again, as we mentioned earlier, you might have to achieve that through scripting rather than the native functionality that you have within ReadyAPI. So while that can be, a perfect option, you still might have that barrier to entry with regards to other users. So if you start collaborating and you have other team members that aren't as experienced with, let's say, scripting, the barrier to entry with SoapUI can be a bit more difficult, or as you start to scale up and the collaboration becomes more important, then that's something to look at. But yeah, all that functionality can be achieved within SoapUI. Now, with regards the multi-protocol, again, that this would be another key benefit of ReadyAPI. So ReadyAPI would support OpenAPI, so the testing of REST APIs, async APIs. So for instance, Kafka services, WSDL definitions for SOAP services. We have JMS messaging, gRPC, GraphQL. So you can see there's quite a lot of protocols supported within ReadyAPI. Again, it is that commercial offering. Within SoapUI, you do have the support for REST APIs, the testing of REST APIs, SOAP services, GraphQL, but you wouldn't have that additional support then for the other protocols. And it might be a case where that would be meeting the majority of customers' needs. But for any customers that are looking to test those additional protocols, then ReadyAPI would have those already, support for those already included.